All right, welcome everyone to today's Farm to School Purchasing Grant Orientation and Training webinar. My name is Claire Finnerty, and I'm the Farm to School Purchasing Grant Specialist with the Washington State Department of Agriculture's Farm to School program. So this webinar is for grantees who have been awarded funding for the Farm to School Purchasing Grant. And this grant program is made possible by the Washington State Legislature and longtime partners and advocates who have been pushing for this investment. And the webinar is being recorded, so please keep your microphones off. Feel free to keep your camera on or off, whatever works for you. A link to the recording and the presentation slides will be in your WSDA grant portal where you applied, and we'll email you a link as well. So there will be time for questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to type them into the chat box so that I can come back to them at the end. All right, so this is a 2-hour meeting today, and first we'll start with the purchasing grant orientation, followed by question and answer, and then I'll turn it over to Adriana at OSPI for the local procurement training. So in the orientation section, I'm going to cover an overview of the grant, conditions of the award, key dates to get into your calendar, how to use the WSDA grant portal, how to request reimbursement for food and non-food costs, and then information on monitoring requirements, and finally how to source Washington foods, and then information on technical assistance and how we're here to help you. So who are we at WSDA? So the Washington State Department of Agriculture's Regional Markets Program specifically supports small farms who directly sell to their customers. So that's including childcare centers and schools. So by being a part of this grant and choosing to buy local, you can make a huge difference in the livelihoods of small farmers in your community. WSDA's Farm to School program promotes farm to school connections and is dedicated to fostering relationships between schools, childcare centers, and agricultural producers in Washington State. So we are here to support you in your farm to early care and education, or we like to say farm to ECE connections with the training and resources here. And of course, we offer the purchasing grant. So we want to thank OSPI for their support in grant administration for the first 2 grant cycles. In this 2023-2025 biennium, for round 1 and round 2, WSDA is offering a total of $4 million in farm to school purchasing grants from the federal COVID recovery funds and from state general funds. So again, we're grateful to the longtime partners who have been pushing for this investment for many years. We know one of the biggest barriers to farm to ECE purchasing is limited budget, which is why we're excited to be able to offer this grant. And we hope that the grants will help accomplish WSDA's dual goals of expanding opportunities for farmers and increasing access to healthy Washington-grown food for youth in our state. This is a competitive reimbursement grant, meaning that you must pay for the product first before requesting reimbursement. So first, we wanted to say congratulations. Thank you for your dedication to farm to early learning. This round was very competitive, with more than double the amount of funds requested than we had to offer. So we ended up with a total of 104 grantees that were awarded around $3.7 million. We're so excited to offer this additional support, the incredible work that you're all doing in support of Washington producers, and to provide healthy, nutritious meals to kids across Washington. So I wanted to remind you that these are special funds for special foods. As I mentioned, this grant is meant to support small farmers. So please use your limited funds to support small farmers. It may take a few more steps than making a purchase from a retail store, but it makes a huge difference for small farmers' livelihood. So in terms of conditions of the award, all grantees must remain an active CACFP sponsor for the duration of the grant, also be currently active in SAM and have a unique entity ID, and have a statewide vendor number to be reimbursed by WSDA. So if these are conditions you have not yet met, then I have been in contact with you via email, and please reach out if you have any more questions about the status of your grant agreement. If you are a returning grantee, look out for these stars in the presentation, and that will note big changes from last year. So you've been awarded funding for round 1 of the 2023-2025 Farm to School Purchasing Grant. The funding period begins on the date of grant agreement execution. So that's when both parties sign the agreement, you and WSDA. So do not make any purchases before signing the grant agreement and having that fully executed, since you will not be reimbursed for those items. This grant ends on June 30th, 2025. So you might hear about round 2 applications coming out in the spring. You are not eligible to apply for round 2. This is additional funding for childcare centers that are not yet part of the grant program. So again, don't apply to round 2. The award that you receive is the total funding from now until June of 2025. The reimbursement requests are due on the 10th of the month or the Monday following if the 10th falls on a weekend. So you are required to complete a food reimbursement request every month, regardless of whether or not you have made any purchases. So if you have not made any purchases, you will simply answer one question as to why you have not made any purchases and what your plans are to make future purchases. So again, that's new this year. You will be contacting us once a month to let us know. You are also required to complete 3 short grant reports. So the first baseline report is due January 10th, and then there's an interim report in 2024 and a final report in 2025, and that's all within the Wise Hive grant portal. So your grant award will include funds from the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, that's CSLFRF, the federal funds, and also the general fund state funds. So the specific amount from each fund source is stated on your grant agreement face sheet. That's the first page. And will also be in the award detail section of the Wise Hive grant portal. So the following table lists the specific expenditure period during which you must spend these funds. So the date of grant, again, the date of grant agreement execution is when both parties have signed, which is yourself and WSDA. Yes, I will link the grant portal website at the end here, Sarah. Your federal award needs to be spent between the date of grant execution and December 31st, 2024. So this means you must spend all of your federal funds by December 31st, 2024. They are use it or lose it funds and will not be rolled over. And this is important to note that the timeline here, this is 13 months. And so you will have to be spending more proportionately in the year 2024 rather than 2025. So just note that in your budget. So general funds from the state can be spent after you've spent all of your federal funds, with the first date, the earliest being July 1st, 2024, and then towards the end of the grant period, which is June 30th, 2025. So all reimbursement requests for goods and services that are received and paid must be submitted according to the following schedule. So reimbursement requests received after the deadline will not be reimbursed. So these are 3 important deadlines. And this is a lot, so I'm going to show you in a different, more visual way to help us walk through that. So the beginning of the grant is when both parties have signed the grant agreement. The end of the grant is June 30th, 2025. And a very important date is December 31st, 2024. That's when the COVID federal funds expire. So you'll have to spend your federal funds in the first 13 months of the grant. And you'll have to spend your state funds as soon as you finish your federal funds, but no earlier than July 1st, 2024. Again, this is anywhere from 6 to 12 months, and you have been allocated more federal funds than is proportionate to the 13 months and the 6 months. So make sure you are ready to spend down your federal funds by December 31st, 2024. Then to add to this layer, we have our state fiscal year closeout. So anything that you purchased before June 30th, 2024, you will have to request reimbursement by July 10th. Anything you request between in the second state fiscal year, you will have to request by July 10th. And then one more thing, let me go back here. If you spend your federal awards from June 30th to December 31st, you also have to let us know and request your reimbursement by January 10th, 2025. So those are the main key dates for this, and we'll be reminding you throughout the grant period, of course, about these dates. All right, so I'm going to give a high-level overview of the Wise Hive Grant Portal. This is the grant portal where you applied for the grant. So here is the link, and I know you asked for it in the chat. I'll do that at the end here. And for a more detailed walkthrough, please join our office hours in January. I'm going to walk through this on the browser. So the email and password that you use to log in for your application will remain the same throughout the grant period. So you may have to share that information or ensure that the person that's managing the grant has access to Wi-Fi. You can always edit your contact information here in the profile. And to get started, you will click on your card here that says Active Grant. I'm working on this behind the scenes to get everyone to the Active Grant page. Right now, what I'm showing you, you don't have access to just yet, but you will very soon. And this is what it looks like when you click on Active Grant. You'll see the resource section. Anytime I mention a link or a recording, slides, that will all be here in the resource section. The food reimbursement request section, this will need to be completed every month, like I said, by the 10th of the month. So you'll update us on your progress, or you'll request reimbursement for Washington grown foods that you purchased. Then we have the non-food reimbursement request form. So this is if you have completed a purchase for your non-food costs that have been pre-approved, then you'll go here, you'll see that list. The budget modification request form is to be completed if you need to make a change to your budget, and I'll explain a little bit more later. And then your baseline report survey. So like I said, January 10th, put that in your calendar. You'll just open it up and answer a few questions. You keep scrolling, you'll see the awarded section and the award details. So this is where you'll see your grant agreement and your signed grant agreement. And also there's a section that is grant budget details. So that is a really cool section that you can see how much you have remaining, how much you've spent down of your grant awards, and you can feel free to look at that at any time. And finally, you'll see your application. So if you ever want to view your application again, just for reference, that will live here. Just please don't make any changes to it. Okay, let's jump into food reimbursements. So what kinds of food can you buy with these funds? You can purchase whole and minimally processed fruits, vegetables, herbs, meats, seafood, legumes, and grains that are 100% grown, raised, caught, or foraged in Washington State. Minimally processed means it could be refrigerated, sliced, diced, washed, packaged. And you can define local for your child care center in many ways, but for the purpose of this grant, local is defined as grown, raised, caught, or foraged in Washington State. In terms of fully processed foods, such as bread products or dairy, the primary ingredient, which is the largest ingredient by weight or volume, must be 100% grown in Washington. So for example, yogurt containing milk from cows, 100% raised in Washington, or pizza dough containing flour from wheat, grown 100% in Washington. This is a change from last year when we required 51% of all ingredients in a product to be Washington grown, meaning that not all products approved last year will qualify. So we have made this change to diversify products and encourage grantees to purchase items not already purchased on a regular basis and purchase from small and mid-sized producers. Again, we like to say that these are special funds for special foods. So every dollar that you spend has value and can support a resilient local food system. So this is the form. It is your responsibility to determine and ensure that the products you request for reimbursement are eligible and meet the requirements. So this new form, the Washington Grown Food Product Verification Form, is on our website, and it's also in the Wise Hive resource section. It is specific to just this grant, and it is required for processed foods. It is not required for whole and minimally processed foods because you will list the farm source and county on your monthly expenditure report. But if we are not able to identify or verify the farm source for a whole or minimally processed food, we might request the vendor completes this form. So before making a purchase of a processed food item, you will reach out to your vendor and ensure that they meet compliance with the grant rules. You'll give them this form to fill out, and then you'll keep the form in your records and turn it in with each food reimbursement request that has processed foods. So we've already communicated with producers who sold processed foods last year to child care centers and schools through this grant. So they should be aware of this change and ready to provide the form if they meet the requirements. I have reached out to larger distributors for popular products like Auburn Dairy's Yummy Yogurt and Treetop Applesauce to determine if these products qualify. So I will make an announcement when I hear back. Keep in mind, again, the grant purpose is to support small farmers, so it should be really easy for a value-added producer to fill out this form. For example, if it's a berry producer who makes jam, they would just simply fill in their name, the jam, the berry here, the jam here, and then their farm and address. All right, so eligible food purchases can be purchased from a variety of direct and indirect sources. So direct options include farms, ranches, fisheries, farmers markets, farm stands, and even your own garden. So, however, it's important to note you can't buy an avocado from a farm stand since that avocado was not grown in Washington. We highly encourage buying products directly from Washington farmers and food producers. You may also purchase Washington grown foods from your grocery store, other retailers, or any distributors. So if you're purchasing from an indirect source, be sure that the product or vendor provides information about the original farm source. So for example, if you're going to buy apples at Costco, you need to take a picture of the farm name and location that's on the sign or the package that proves that the apple was grown in Washington. As a reminder, you must follow all applicable federal and state procurement rules and regulations. And that's what Adriana will cover after this presentation. So if you are using grant funds to purchase produce from your garden, you must use prices that are comparable to those at the market. So check out your local farmers market, see how much a carrot costs, and then if you're growing carrots, you can use that cost to reimburse yourself. So if you have any questions about food safety practices for bringing garden produce into your kitchen, feel free to check out this USDA resource or reach out to us or OSPI or your local health department. Once your Washington grown food has been ordered, received, and paid, you can now start the reimbursement process. And the reimbursement process for food is located here in the WSDA grant portal. And the steps would be to go to the grant portal, complete all of the questions in the food reimbursement request form. That includes the monthly expenditure report, which is an Excel spreadsheet. And if you have any processed products, it would include uploading this food product verification form. And then the next step is that I will review the monthly report to approve the expenses. I will send you a confirmation email with the total approved amount. And then WSDA will send payment through the statewide vendor pay system. And we will let you know when that has been processed. All right, so I'm going to open up the monthly expenditure report. The link to the monthly expenditure report is in WiseHive, and it'll open up into your browser on the internet, and you'll have to download it into Excel. And then it will look like this. So you'll see the first tab is instructions. Then you'll see the sample tab. And then finally, this is the expenditure report tab, where you'll actually fill out all of your information. I'm going to show you in this sample tab. So you'll start up here with your organization name, program type. Keep in mind, these are all drop down. So it's really important for us that you use these so we can stay organized. The report month and year. And then you will start filling out the monthly expenditure report. So anytime you need to see the directions, you'll notice there's a little red tab here in the corner, and you just hover over the cell. So the invoice date is between your grant agreement execution and the end of the grant. So you'll enter that. the paid date. So do not submit this MER until all items are paid and received. So if you are purchasing from a distributor and takes a while for you to pay the distributor, you'll have to make sure you wait until everything has been paid for. The vendor name, that is who you paid for the product. So this year we've added a list of about 100 vendors that we know from last year are commonly purchased from. So this is not necessarily a list of approved vendors. It's simply for convenience and for organizing the data. You can scroll through and click, or you can start to type and it will pop up for you. So if by chance there is a vendor that is not on this list, then you have this column to be able to write in a new vendor name. Another important thing about the vendor name are these two. So direct from farm. So if you're purchasing directly from a farm, you will do this option. And if you are purchasing directly from your garden, you will click this option. Next is farm name. So you must include the farm name. This is how we verify that the food was grown in Washington. Again, this is a long drop-down list. It's about 300 farms that are in Washington that have been purchased from previously by grantees. And again, it's not necessarily an approved list. It's just out of convenience here. So you can type in or use the drop-down list. And same concept here with the write-in. If it's not on the list, you will just type it in here. The one unique button here is See Processed Product Form. So if you have a processed product, let's say tortillas, then you'll click this because maybe they have a list of 10 wheat farmers across Washington. So you could use this button. And then you see here is an example of directly from the garden is the vendor and the farm name. It's not listed here, so you'll just simply write it. You'll type it out here. Next is county. This is imperative. Again, this is how we verify that the food you purchased was Washington grown. So it's the county where the food was grown. It's not where you purchased it or where the vendor is located. It's where the food was grown. And this is a drop-down list. So always use the drop-down list where they are. Next is category. Again, this is the drop-down list. Product specification. Move over here. You hover over this, you'll see the direction. So type in the general product name, followed by the variety and any other details. So here we have carrots shredded or apples that are whole and Fuji variety. So be specific here, that's helpful for us. Next is what form did the item come in? And your options are whole, minimally processed, or fully processed. And if you choose fully processed, that means we'll be looking out for the food product verification form. Next is quantity. That is only a number. So only enter a number into this cell. And then you'll use the drop-down list for units here. If none of these work, just please use units. If you can please provide an estimate for total pounds, just using a number there. And then finally, the total price. So of course, this is the most important part, should match your invoice or receipt. And then this is a just for fun column. So how did you use the item? Did you use it on your salad bar? Did you use it for harvest of the month? I was just going to say that I had a producer meeting earlier this week and I shared some really cool ways that past grantees have used their food. So this is really awesome to have storytelling and just get to know how you're using the Washington produce. These last two, of course, are just for me to go through and either approve, not approve, or see approval status notes. So you will turn this in on WiseHive. You'll upload it, and then I will take a look at it and go through every line item and either approve or not approve or ask for more details in this column. And then you will be able to see your total amount here. So this is your total requested and your total approved. So this is everything in the monthly expenditure report. And I'd be happy to go over it again in office hours or with you one-on-one at another time. All right. We're going to hop back into the presentation. So in terms of documentation requirements, you are not required to include copies of the invoices or receipts when submitting your food reimbursement request. However, grantees must retain records of all purchases and supporting documentation to demonstrate expenses meet the Washington grown requirement to be eligible for reimbursement. So those records may include receipts, paid invoices, any other financial record, product label, case label, things like that that show that the farm shows the farm source is in Washington. If you are including a process item, again, you'll need to turn in your Washington grown food product verification form. And very important to note is that you must keep all of your records for a period of 6 years. And we will be doing desk reviews this year. So please make sure you're staying organized and keep all of your receipts ready to go. For non-food reimbursement, some of you requested non-food costs. So you may only purchase and be reimbursed for non-food costs that have been approved for your organization. The Farm to School Purchasing Grant may be used to cover non-food costs that directly support the development and sustainability of farm to school efforts to purchase and promote foods grown and raised in Washington State. So you are only able to purchase non-food costs that were approved from your application. They are listed on the last page of your grant agreement. They look like this in your attachment B. And they will also be in WiseHive, your non-food reimbursement request. So you'll see the list here of everything that's pre-approved, and do not make any purchases you were not approved for. So once your non-food cost has been ordered, received, and paid for, you can now start the reimbursement process. Again, this is where it lives in WiseHive. And this is the list. You'll click on the item that you've purchased. And all non-food costs require receipt and proof of payment. So this is new from last year. Proof of payment is an invoice or receipt that shows a balance of 0 and shows the method of payment. Or if you have a sales or order a delivery invoice that shows an amount due but not a balance of 0, you would show us the copy of the cash check, a screenshot of your bank statement showing the payment was processed, or a proof of a bank wire transfer. And then the same steps as for food. So I will review those expenses, email you with the total approved amount, and we will pay you through the statewide vendor payee system and let you know when those get paid. Please submit your food and non-food cost reimbursement requests at the same time. So I make sure to get them paid at the same time on the same invoice. So these are very specific requirements by type of non-food cost, and all of this information is in WiseHive. But you will have to turn in for transportation mileage, a mileage log that includes the trip purpose, the mileage, the starting location and ending location, and as well as the current reimbursement rate. For staff time, you would provide information that shows the hours, the pay rate, any taxes, and the description of work. For materials and supplies, as well as equipment, you would just simply turn in an invoice or receipt that shows the description, quantity, price, and as well as a photo. For travel, we're working on a travel reimbursement template. But if you're requested travel to like a farm to school conference, then you would have to include all of the following details: lodging, mileage, meals, following per diem rates. And if any of you have a third-party farm to school consultant service, then you would provide the invoice that shows the description of services, number of hours, hourly rate, and benefits, or a flat fee if the service is all for not farm to school purposes. If you are requesting any equipment over $5,000, you have to comply with additional rules. So maintain property records. You'll need to conduct a physical inventory every 2 years, as well as develop a control system. And make sure that the purchased equipment is in use for at least 3 years from the end of the grant period. And when you are getting rid of the equipment, you'll have to follow the disposition requirements. Okay, headed into additional information. So this key date links to a document that shows all of the dates for this grant round. So reimbursement requests for food and non-food costs are due on the 10th or the Monday following. And so the first reimbursement requests are due on January 10th, and they will be labeled as a December 2023 report. So basically, if you purchased anything in December, then you're turning it in January 10th. That's why it's called a December 2023 report. And if you did not make any purchases, you still need to fill out the food reimbursement request form every month, just to simply answer one question as to your plans for spending your grant funds going forward. You will receive reimbursement 30 days after an approved invoice. So an approved invoice is after the reimbursement request has been received, reviewed and approved by WSDA, and then approved for payment by our fiscal department with all required backing documentation. So as for budget modification, which I mentioned previously, if you need to make a change, you will complete the budget modification request form in WiseHive. And those changes could be if your non-food costs exceed 20% of the cost that you allocated in your budget. So if something is a lot more expensive than you requested for, you would have to go through the budget modification process. If you happen to want to purchase any additional costs that are not included in your attachment B grant agreement, then you would go through this process. Or if you want to shift funds from non-food to food costs, you would fill out this form. So remember, you need to seek pre-approval by completing the budget modification form. So do not buy anything until the budget modification request has been approved. And this is where it lives in Wise Hive. So what is not eligible with this grant? Food expenses that are not grown in Washington. So even if your application included ineligible foods like oranges and bananas, you cannot purchase them. So if they're not grown in Washington, you can't purchase them, even if they were in your application. Anything purchased before your grant agreement was executed. So be sure to get confirmation via DocuSign that both yourself and WSDA had signed the grant agreement before you start purchasing. And anything after the end of the grant, we would not reimburse. Fluid milk is not eligible with this grant. So the reason for excluding milk is to encourage new vendor relationships with the diversity of Washington farms and to incorporate new products beyond what is already commonly purchased. And then finally, you can't purchase any non-food costs that are not approved in your grant agreement. This year, we will be performing desk reviews. You will see what your risk level is on Wise Hive, and it also came in your award details when you received your award letter. So if you're low risk, you'll submit monthly expenditure reports and maintain all supporting documentation for 6 years after the grant closed, and you'll be subject to random desk review. If you are medium risk, you will have to submit your receipts with your first monthly expenditure report. And if you're high risk, you'll have to submit receipts with your first 3 monthly expenditure reports. So we'll be communicating with you on your risk level as well. So we know that grantees have varied experiences when it comes to sourcing local Washington grown foods, and this slide contains select links and additional resources to help you get started with planning purchases, identifying farm sources, and connecting with other partners engaged in local purchasing activities. So we do want to highlight the Washington Food and Farm Finder. There's a wholesale page if you have a larger childcare center. There's also just a map of Washington State with farmers. And so you would go and you would type in your zip code. You could see who's in your delivery area. You could go by different types of food or even farmer identities. So I would highly recommend starting at the Food and Farm Finder to understand who's in your neighborhood, who's in your community, which farmers. So one useful resource to help determine what foods are available from Washington farms during different times of the year are the Washington grown seasonality charts. So we've included a link to this resource in the slides and encourage you to use this to help you make purchases between now and the end of the grant. You can also contact your WSU Extension office to help you think about what varieties of fruits and vegetables are in your area, and we'd be happy to talk that out as well. If you have social media, we would love to see stories about the local food that you're incorporating in your programs. And feel free to @ us or use these hashtags because we love to share these stories with the broader community. And then we also wanted to highlight resources specific to farm to early childcare education. The Washington State Farm to ECE Community of Practice, that's a part of the Farm to School Network. It's a really wonderful community. They meet quarterly and they have a lot of resources. So I would definitely recommend checking them out. They even have a fresh produce purchasing and prep guide that's meant for specifically early childcare. And one more thing is the Seattle Farm to Preschool program. So they have additionally their own set of resources too that I would go and check out. So I know this was a ton of information that I just covered. So you still might have questions or need extra assistance. I'm happy to help one-on-one. We also have office hours every month. So like I said, our first office hour will be January 5th, and we'll do a WSDA grant portal walkthrough. And after that, we will decide what works best for childcare grantees, and we'll find a time to have monthly office hours. And it's really a great space for peer-to-peer learning. So we talk about what's going well, what kinds of foods you're incorporating into your menus that are local and seasonal, and any challenges, and try and work through those. So again, please feel free to reach out to me. We also have a farm to school lead at WSDA, and that's Lona, and she would be happy to help as well. So feel free to call, email anytime. And now I'm going to open it up to questions. So I know this is a long presentation, but feel free to stand up and take a break or stretch. We'll get started with the OSPI procurement training at 3, but for now I'm going to go over some questions in the chat. And I did see this question about CSA weekly boxes. We didn't do this last year, or we didn't have anyone purchasing CSA last year. So this is a new procedure. So I want to get back to you on specifics, but this is a reimbursement grant. So you will have to actually receive the product first and to be able to receive payment. So if it's on a weekly basis, you will have to foot the bill to pay ahead of time for the CSA, and then we will reimburse you. And I can talk with you more about that, more about the specifics, since this will be new this year. But that's really exciting that you're going to do a CSA box. That's a really great way it's an easy way to work with a farm and have seasonal produce coming to you delivered, or maybe pick up. So that's awesome that you're signing up for a CSA. Let's see. Anyone else have questions? I'm going to put the link to the portal here. Find that for you. That's the WSDA grant portal link. Anyone have any questions? Does the award, the two separate award timelines make sense? The federal and the state timelines? All right, well, I'm gonna also share my screen really quickly to show you the Food and Farm Finder. So there's a wholesale vendor, which if you're a larger childcare center, then you could use this. But if you're smaller, you might want to use this regular map that is used for any consumer. as you can see, I had listed a zip code here, and then you can see who is close by you, and you can do lots of different sorting. So check out farms. Maybe I'm only looking for fruit and berries. So I can see, oh my gosh, there's so many different farms nearby in Tacoma. And then maybe I'll search for something really specific. Let's see. You can do that. Let's see, I can use it via the map, or I can also go to list view and I can see, oh wow, Wild Hair Organic Farm, looks like they grow carrots. Maybe I'll check them out. I see your question, what is a CSA? CSA is community supported agriculture. So that's when a farm basically sells boxes of produce, whether on a weekly, usually on a weekly basis. And it's called community supported agriculture because you pay at the beginning of the season a flat fee, usually for the whole summer, the whole season. And you're basically almost giving a loan to the farm to have that money up front. And then you are agreeing that if things get tough, such as like, certain crops aren't available or not as much variety as they would have liked that year if the crop fails, you're okay with that. But yeah, so it's a great idea, especially usually they're a box that's a good size for a family, like 2 to 4 people. And so if you wanted to request a larger size, if you have more, obviously more kids, or maybe you want to purchase multiple boxes, or you could use it just as a tool for nutrition education, and you could bring it in and show kids what you got that week, and show about seasonality, and like, oh, we're in the spring and it's asparagus and this is how asparagus is grown and all that. If Helena, if you wanted to unmute yourself and share your experience, if you've ever purchased the CSA, or is this your first time, and how did that work? I'm putting you on the spot, so that's okay if you don't want to answer. But yeah, CSA it's a good option. I believe that you might even be able to look up CSAs here. Yeah, they have the CSA list as well. Yes, explore the CSA finder. Yep, so yeah, check that out.
I'm just going to add here, Claire, that if you're checking that out and you go to their website and you see a pricing sheet potentially, or you see, they're advertising the cost per pound on, say, meat, write it down and keep track of it, because Adriana is going to talk about justifying your purchase, and that will go a long way in doing that.
That's a great setup, Nicole. That's awesome. And yeah, like I said, this is a reimbursement grant, so you would have to purchase the CSA ahead of time and then be reimbursed as you receive the food. The only sometimes CSAs are not paid fully in advance at the beginning, so you might be able to request that. Anybody from last year have any tips? that's a general statement, but I see Claudia. So I'm just thinking, how did it go for you last year? Who did you purchase from, Claudia?
Well, we had some local farms that we purchased eggs from, and ground beef from 2 different local farms. And we had our partner, Catholic Charities Food for All. They actually hooked us up with different agencies that we've kind of kept going. Like we did Okanagan Producers Marketing Association,
Yes,
ODMA.
yes.
Yeah. So we're still getting apples from them right now. We did peaches and pears and apples from them for quite a while. And pears, we were just getting pears last month too. So we did a lot from them. And I can't remember all the little places that we got hooked up with through Catholic Charities, but it was not as successful as I would have wished. So I'm really hoping, we do better this time. Is my plan.
Great.
So
Yeah.
I wasn't organized enough to do request mileage, because that's the only thing, is we don't have anyone to go pick up foods, but we've been lucky that Catholic Charities is picking up. And we're also getting a lot of things through Link, a food hub. And we're having some problems with that last year, and they finally got us rehooked up in it. They had something. They changed their ordering system from a couple years ago, and so we weren't able to order most of last year, but we'll get back with Link again, because then Catholic Charities can pick up from the Link warehouse, and then they deliver for us, and that's been a lifesaver. As otherwise they don't deliver, or a farm doesn't deliver, because we don't order. Each center does not order enough, and even all of the centers together don't order enough so that anyone else could deliver to us. So that's the one hiccup, is the delivery piece for us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it definitely takes time and trial and error to find the right fit with different producers, and just being clear about what you need in terms of delivery and size and all of that, and just finding the right fit. So this grant cycle is longer, so just get started now to have those conversations, and you'll be set through the next couple years. So
yes,
thanks,
and
Claudia.
very excited about, of course, next summer, because
Yes.
summer is our big time for produce, because we don't have the
Exactly.
storage either.
Yes, that'll be great. Thanks so much. If you haven't put your name and organization in the chat, I'm using that for attendance, so please do that. And I'm going to turn it over to Adriana.
Thank you, Claire. My name is Adriana Gutierrez, and I am one of the Farm to Child Nutrition Program Specialists with OSPI. On the call with me is my colleague, Nicole Garden, who is also another Farm to Child Nutrition Program Specialist. Today, we will be reviewing local procurement and CACFP. The incorporation of local food and agricultural education into CACFP can play an important role in creating and promoting a healthy environment. Program administrators and partners are therefore encouraged to use local food as a means to enhance CACFP operations. Farm to Early Childhood programs seek to connect the 3 C's. The classroom, through conducting hands-on food-related learning activities such as gardening, cooking, or taste testing. The cafeteria or kitchen, through serving more local or regionally produced foods or highlighting those you're already serving. The community, through visiting a nearby farm, farmer's market, or farm stand, creating rich opportunities for place-based learning. What is considered local? Your organization gets to define what local means to you in your procurement policy. Definitions vary widely depending on the unique geography and climate where a sponsor is located, and on the abundance of local food producers and manufacturers. Sponsors can define local within a county as within a certain number of miles or within the state. Alternately, definitions might be regional and may include more than one state. For example, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and even Montana. However, this grant is only to be used on Washington-grown foods, so the multi-state definition would not apply here. Keep in mind, your definition of local may change with the seasons and the type of product or special events. What is procurement? Procurement is a process, while purchasing is an event. Procurement includes purchasing. Procurement rules and regulations are important to ensure program benefits and your tax dollars are used effectively and efficiently. Regulations require that all purchases made by sponsors, whether funded wholly or in part with Child Nutrition Program funds, comply with all federal, state, and local procurement requirements. It is important to understand that federal rules do have a purpose, and while they may seem rigid, they do allow for some flexibility and innovation to ensure that sponsors are receiving goods and services that meet the sponsor's needs at the best price. Most everything we do begins with planning. The first step includes planning and budgeting. Planning your procurement, asking the questions what, where, how much, and when. Next, draft your specifications. We're going to be talking about this more coming up, especially as it relates to buying local products. Solicit quote from vendors. This will look differently depending on what procurement method you are required to use. Award the contract. Award the contract to the most responsive and responsible bidder based on your specifications and best prices. Managing the contract. Once the contract is awarded and signed, the procurement process is not over. Monitoring and managing the contract is an ongoing process. Continue to manage the contract to ensure everything is provided according to your specifications and contract terms. Planning is an essential part of any meal program. However, you may want to add local products to your menu. It is even more important to plan ahead. Communicating with your vendors and producers the types and volumes of products that will be needed as early as possible can help ensure that items are available when you need them. Early planning also helps you narrow your solicitation by identifying specific foods available locally. Why is that important? Narrowing your specifications can justify a separate bid to make a one-time purchase for a product. Determining what procurement threshold you will need to follow is based on the aggregate value of the purchase. Aggregate value is the sum of all costs that are paid for goods and services required to satisfy a need over a period of time. This would include all purchases of similar products during the same fiscal year across your meal program. For example, if your organization plans to purchase $1,000 worth of apples several times throughout the year, you will need to estimate how much you plan to spend for the entire year to determine the aggregate value. Instead, childcare centers can identify a specific variety of the type of product. When purchasing apples, a childcare center could use specifications to target gala apples instead of conducting a procurement to obtain a single supplier for all apples for the year. This would make the aggregate value how much you plan to spend for the entire year on gala apples, not all apple varieties. Additionally, childcare centers with special menu offerings such as Harvest of the Month or a seasonal special can justify a separate solicitation to make a one-time purchase for a product. What is a specification, you ask? A specification is part of a solicitation. A solicitation outlines the following: introduction, solicitation scope. It includes the type of procurement, local goals, and preference. Specifications, a general description of goods and services. This provides a description of the products needed. Technical requirements is a criteria for a responsive and responsible vendor. This includes delivery, food safety, and insurance requirements. Evaluation criteria includes geographic preference. In your solicitation, a sponsor may specify what they want. A sponsor may not specifically mention that they only want local products. A sponsor may indicate their goals to serve local products and emphasize the importance of their farm to CACFP programming. While local cannot be used in your specifications, it can be used in your introduction as long as you have defined what local means to your program. Your interest in purchasing local products can be expressed in your introduction language. Here are some examples. ABC Child Care Center wants to connect with local food producers to improve child nutrition, provide agriculture and nutrition education opportunities, and support local and regional farmers. Farm to CACFP is a priority of ABC Child Care Center. Our goal is to serve 20% local products. Specifications tell potential bidders what you want. Food specifications tell bidders exactly what you want, and bidders must meet these requirements for their bids to be considered responsive. If you are trying to procure local products specifically, you should include language in your specification that identifies qualities you would expect from a local farm or vendor. Each of the elements listed on this slide could be used as product specifications or technical requirements, as long as they don't overly limit competition. Let's look at a few examples. Particular varieties unique to a region. So if I'm in Walla Walla County and I issue a solicitation for Walla Walla sweet onions, chances are it's going to come from a local vendor. USDA has specific grading standards for foods. These grades can be helpful since they provide a common language that both producers, vendors, and buyers can use to have a clear picture of what you want and what a vendor has available. Keep in mind that a small to mid-sized grower is likely not to grade their products. You don't have to request a specific grade. Just try spelling out the specification of a grade. Condition is another component to consider when crafting your solicitation. Condition refers to a degree of soundness or preservation of a product and includes, but is not necessarily limited to its firmness or stages of ripeness, decay, shriveling, and any other progressive factors which affect its marketability. Freshness, for example, delivering within 48 hours. Requiring product to be delivered with 48 hours of harvest serves a dual purpose. You can really get fresh produce, and you can also increase the chances that a product will be local. Size of farm. You can include as a specification a limit on the size of farm you'd like to receive the food from. Farm practices. You can require specific farm practices are utilized, such as crop rotation or integrated pest management practice, which are more likely to be done on a local, small to mid-sized farm. Harvest techniques. You can require that crops be harvested by hand. Crop diversity. Farms that raise a certain number of crops or livestock. Origin labeling. If you're developing a contract with a distributor, you can require that they include farm of origin or county of origin labeling. Values-based certifications, like you can request that food sourced be grown using practices like no-till, pesticide-free, grass-fed, and cage-free. Be able to provide farm visits or class visits. You can also require that farmers or vendors participate in educational activities, something local farmers are more likely to be able to do than a non-local vendor. Again, you cannot use local in the language of your specification. You can, however, use in your definition of local as a geographic preference. This means you tell potential bidders you will provide them a certain level of preference for bidders that provide a product meeting your definition of local. When it comes to the receipt of a product, it is important to hold your vendor to what is listed on your solicitation. If the condition of the product you ordered is not to your standards or specification, ask for a discount or a refund. This plays a role in contract managing. Remember, a vendor needs to be responsible. So, how do you know what is available when? To help you get started with identifying potential local foods you can add to your menu, check out the Washington State Department of Agriculture's Washington Grown Seasonality Charts, which identify the months of the year when certain fruits, vegetables, and herbs are in season in Washington. Seasonality charts can be a helpful tool when planning your menu and reaching out about product availability. You can also contact your local WSU Extension office to learn about local varieties of fruits and vegetables that grow best in your specific region in Washington. Technical requirements are things that are not negotiable. These include food safety. It is in your best interest to ensure that producers you work with follow good food safety practices. Be sure to include your organization's food safety requirements in your solicitation. Indicate what types of food safety verifications you will accept. For example, good agricultural practices certification, good handling practice, on-farm food safety plan, and etc. This slide contains resources to help you determine what food safety practices may be required or you might consider requiring. The Iowa State University, ISU, has a great food safety checklist. Be sure to check it out. It is third bullet in food safety. Insurance. Indicate what type of insurance you need a producer to carry, what amount they need to be insured at, and so on. This is not a requirement of CACFP programs. However, it can provide security in case there are any issues with a foodborne illness. Delivery. Indicate any delivery requirements such as number of deliveries desired, preferred dates and/or times, childcare center or on-farm pickups, and so on. Additional requests indicate extra requests like field trips to the farm, ranch, farmers' visits to the classroom, and/or an assembly presentation, or inclusion of recipes and more. Sometimes it's hard to level the playing field when purchasing from a local farm versus large distributor. We encourage sponsors to use geographic preference in their solicitation and quote requests. Geographic preference allows you to prioritize locally grown agricultural products without listing local in your specification, which again is not allowed. Sponsors may apply a geographic preference to their evaluation criteria section of their solicitation when procuring unprocessed, locally grown, or locally raised agricultural products. USDA has defined unprocessed as unprocessed or minimally processed agricultural products that retain their original characteristics. This applies to peeled, sliced, diced, cut, chopped, shucked, ground, dried, washed, packed products. It does not apply to any products that have been cooked, heated, canned, or have any additives or fillers. You can apply geographic preference by dollar value, such as giving pennies off the quoted price, giving additional points, giving a percentage off the price. When utilizing the geographic preference to procure such products, sponsors will need to use their definition of local. The definition should be tied to the agricultural product, not the location of the respondent. For example, if a vendor is located in Vancouver, Washington, but the product was grown in Oregon, if your definition of local is Washington State, the vendor would not be responsive. And now we'll go into a knowledge check. I will ask that you put in your answers in the chat, and then I will allow a brief second for you to think of those answers. What is the aggregate value of a purchase? The total aggregate value means the sum of all costs that are paid for goods and services required to satisfy a need over a period of time. Program operators may utilize micro-purchasing when the aggregate cost is less than your childcare center's micro-purchase threshold when making purchases of similar products. The total cost of a transaction or occurrence in which goods, services, or money is exchanged between two or more entities. Next question. Why is this important when targeting local foods? In order to justify a separate bid to make a one-time purchase for a product. Next question, true or false? A childcare center can use geographic preference in a solicitation for whole grain rolls to prioritize bakers who use Washington wheat. False. Whole grain rolls are considered a processed product and therefore cannot be procured using geographic preference. Geographic preference can only be applied to raw or minimally processed foods. There are 3 procurement methods: micro, small, and formal. CACFP sponsors need to follow a federal procurement threshold unless your procurement policy is more restrictive. We are going to be focusing on micro and small procurement today because likely your centers are small enough that you will not require a formal procurement. You would need to spend over $250,000 with one vendor to require formal procurement. Remember, procurement thresholds and purchasing authority are not the same thing. Micro purchases are aggregate totals of similar purchases. Quotes are not required. Prices must be considered reasonable, and you should document how you determined the prices to be reasonable. That can be based on research, purchase history, or experience, or some other method, like an internet search. Micro purchases should be spread equitably among suppliers or vendors for compliance with full and open competition requirements. Document all procurement and purchasing decisions. Sponsors cannot arbitrarily divide purchases to fall below the small purchase threshold. You can add information to your POs or requisition forms that reads, "We determined these prices to be reasonable based on research, purchase history, or other." You can also create a list of vendors you anticipate using for your micro purchases for the year and denote how you determine the prices to be reasonable. Be sure to sign and date your documentation. Again, based on research, experience, or an internet search is a reasonable reason. Here is an example showing how a sponsor can document reasonable price determinations for micro purchase vendors. We purchase supplies and food items from a reputable vendor like a grocery store, local food hub, and big box store. We researched products online from multiple vendors, or we purchased items from local stores and determined the price is reasonable based on purchase history and experience. We maintain documentation by vendor of how reasonable prices determinations were made. Grocery store name. Prices were determined to be reasonable based on purchase history. Local food hub name. Prices were determined to be reasonable based on internet search and comparing. Big box store, warehouse name. Prices were determined to be reasonable based on purchase history. Be sure to date and sign and maintain in your procurement files and folders. Use small purchase procedures when your total purchases are above the micro purchase threshold of $10,000 and below the federal threshold of $250,000. Small purchases require obtaining price or rate quotes from an adequate number of qualified vendors. You will need to document all of your requests and responses. OSPI considers 3 quotes adequate. However, if you are unable to find 3 vendors who can be responsive to your specifications, just document your search attempts. If you choose vendors that do not provide quotes, such as food hubs, Costco, Winco, Walmart, and so on, you should plan sufficient time to compare prices among 3 different vendors using 75% of the items you regularly purchase in your CACFP program. For example, research the cost of items typically purchased for your meal program. This can be a minimum of 75% of all items with a minimum of 3 vendors. Compare which vendor would have the lowest overall cost. The vendor with the lowest overall cost for those items can be considered a prime vendor and used throughout the year. It is highly recommended to include your specifications with your requests for quotes. While you cannot intentionally divide purchases to keep them below a particular threshold, just to avoid having to obtain quotes, did you know you can split a procurement in limited situations? There are many legitimate reasons to issue a separate bid for solicitation. It is typical for childcare centers to divide purchases based on inherent differences in foods, such as shelf life, delivery methods, seasonality, and other characteristics. In the case of local procurement programs, if the childcare center has a special menu offering such as Harvest of the Month or seasonal special that justifies a separate bid for a one-time purchase for a product and receive the best price because products are often cheaper when they are in season, that is acceptable. This type of purchasing practice might improve the quality and/or economic feasibility of a program. In this instance, the split would not be considered an arbitrary action. For example, when purchasing fruits and vegetables, a childcare center could release a specific bid solicitation to target Lasciano kale instead of conducting a procurement to obtain a single supplier for all fruits and vegetables for the year. Childcare centers with special menu offerings such as Harvest of the Month or a seasonal special can also justify a separate bid to make a one-time purchase for a product. Keep in mind if you intend to purchase the same item from 2 different vendors, your specification should include the following statements in all applicable contracts. The childcare center reserves the right to competitively purchase from different vendors throughout the year. If you ever struggle to justify the division of a purchase, it is likely you should not split that purchase. CACFP sponsors should only award vendors that are both responsive and responsible. To be considered responsive, a vendor must submit a response to a solicitation that conforms to all the material terms and conditions in the solicitation. For example, if you say you want apples and the vendor comes back with a quote for peaches, they are not responsive. Or if you require delivery, but a vendor can only provide on-farm pickup, they would not be considered responsive. To be considered responsible, a vendor must be capable of performing successfully under the terms and conditions of the contract. Regardless of which procurement method is used, the bidder must meet any product specifications and other requirements that are outlined in your specification. And awards must be made only to responsive and responsible bidders. CACFP sponsors must adapt to their own procurement policies and procedures and are required to have a procurement plan in place. Procurement plans are written documents describing how your organization conducts procurement transactions in accordance with federal, state, local, and tribal laws and regulations. Unsure of where to find your procurement plan or if you have one at all. These are typically found in fiscal or accounting policies and procedures. They can also be found under purchasing policies and procedures. If you are unable to find yours, let our procurement specialist, Barb Krogstad, know, and she'll be able to provide you a template to get started. On this slide, you can see her contact information, which I will share at the end of this presentation again. Adding a definition of local to your policies and procedures goes a long way in justifying the purchase and ensuring your farm to CACFP local procurement is sustainable. It is important to have your definition of local and still maintain full and open competition. This slide contains an example of a procurement plan. ABC Child Center defines local for this purpose as a tiered system where Whatcom County is the priority area. Skagit County is the secondary area, followed by the rest of Washington State for when items are not available from priority or secondary areas. All areas may be within the definition of local for geographic preference purposes, though more points will be awarded for food sourced from the priority area. And now we'll go into another knowledge check. Please remember to put your answers in the chat. When is splitting similar procurements allowable? Valid reasons to split a purchase include if there are fundamental differences between these and other food products such as shorter shelf life, specialized pricing mechanisms, and durability. Shelf life, delivery methods, seasonality, and other characteristics such as seasonal menu may allow you to split purchases based on inherent differences and are not arbitrary decisions. Harvest of the month programs, taste tests, and purchases for farm to CACFP events are all valid reasons to divide a purchase. Next question. When is splitting similar procurements not allowable? Answer, splitting procurements is not allowable when you have already found a farmer you want to buy from, when you don't want to get 3 quotes. Next question. ABC Childcare Center wants to purchase $500 in carrots from a farmer near them. The farmer quoted them $2 a pound, which is less than what they paid at the farmer's market last year. Can they use the micro purchase procurement method? You answered yes, you are correct. Yes, because the aggregate value is under $10,000. Next question, true or false? Documentation is not required for informal procurements. False. Sponsors must document how you determined the prices to be reasonable for micro purchases. Allowable reasons can be based on research, historical purchases, or experience. All small formal procurements must be documented too. Next question. What language cannot be included in a specification but can be listed as a preference? If you answered locally grown, you are correct. Currently, locally grown can be applied as a preference, but not a specification. USDA has proposed a rule allowing this as a specification. That rule has not yet to be finalized. We will notify you once we hear more. Next question. ABC Childcare wants to purchase all of their local produce from a food hub. They estimate the cost of their produce to be $12,500. What procurement threshold should they use and why? If you answered small purchase method because the aggregate value is over $10,000, you are correct. When the aggregate value or estimated total cost exceeds the micro purchase threshold of $10,000, you would use the small purchase method to request quotes from qualified vendors. Next question. What are sponsors required to do for the small purchase method? Develop written specifications, obtain and document 3 quotes. Be sure to give the same information to each food hub or vendor when contacting them by phone or email. Wait a reasonable amount of time for them to respond and document all responses as well as no response. Noting the dates is very important. Choose the food hub with the lowest price or best quote. Institutions operating the child and adult care program must maintain a nonprofit food service operation and keep documentation of food service expenses. Nonprofit food service includes all food service operations conducted by sponsors primarily for the benefit of enrolled participants. This account must include all funds used to support program operations. This includes the Farm to School Purchasing Grant. All federal reimbursement funds must be spent on CACFP program expenses. If you have any questions about your nonprofit food service account, be sure to reach out to your CACFP program specialist for assistance. The items on receipts purchased through the purchasing grant cannot be used for reimbursement for CACFP. Not only will WSDA be conducting reviews to ensure compliance with grant guidelines, OSPI CACFP program specialists will want to review all receipts and invoices paid through the purchasing grant. Be sure to have these available during your administrative review. If you are operating more than one site, be sure to revise your budget and wins for the 2023 to 2024 program year to be included in your budget. Your 2024 to 2025 CACFP application will also need to have the purchasing grant funds included in the budget as a source of income. Track what funding is being used by highlighting purchases with their own distinct color. If a purchase receipt has an expense that is paid by multiple awards, including the Farm to School Purchasing Grant, use a different color for each funding source. We recommend keeping a separate binder for receipts and invoices paid for with the purchasing grant funds and another for your CACFP expenses. While the additional funding through the purchasing grant can improve the quality of meals served, it may also affect your nonprofit food service program, since expenses that would normally be paid through CACFP reimbursement funds will be paid for using these grant funds. If you find your program has an excess of nonprofit food service revenues over nonprofit food service expenses, these funds must be balanced so that your program is not making a profit. Any excess funding should be used to enhance your CACFP program. Consider using the excess funding to support the following allowable costs. Costs associated with growing food, as long as the produce grown in the garden is used as part of a reimbursable meal and for nutrition education activities. These can include seeds, fertilizer, label, plot rental, and so on. Kitchen equipment to help support scratch cooking or keeping your local foods fresh, which can include food processors, blenders, refrigerators, and so on. Staff training for CACFP requirements. Training must be in relation to meal service. Please note, sponsors must receive prior approval through the budget approval process. And now we'll go into a brief knowledge check. I may go through them a little bit faster because we are getting close to time. True or false? Sponsors can claim items funded by the Farm to School Purchasing Grant for CACFP reimbursement. If you answered false, you are correct. Sponsors cannot claim reimbursement for CACFP costs that are funded by the Farm to School Purchasing Grant. That would be claiming the same cost twice. Next question. If you find your program has an excess of nonprofit food service revenues over nonprofit food service expenses, what should you do? Any excess funding should be used to enhance your CACFP program. Consider using excess funding to support scratch cooking, growing a garden, staff training, just to name a few. Other considerations. If you are planning on purchasing local processed products as part of a reimbursable meal, keep in mind that it is still required to have the food item be listed in either the food buying guide, have a CN label, which may not be likely with local food, or obtain a product formulation statement. See the CACFP product documentation reference sheet linked on this slide. Product formulation templates are available on the USDA FNS website and are also linked on this slide. As stated earlier, costs associated with growing food as part of a reimbursable meal and for nutrition education activities, including seeds, fertilizers, labor, plot rental, and etc., are allowable. Keep in mind you will need to maintain the following documentation for 3 years to stay in compliance. What foods were grown and used, date foods were harvested, quantity harvested, receipts for any garden supplies. Per purchasing grant rules, you must maintain these records for 6 years after the grant closes. This slide contains helpful resources to help you in your CACFP programming, and there's direct links that you can click on. As Claire mentioned earlier, you will be provided a copy of these slides so that you can click through these resources. This slide contains rules and regulations. We highly recommend you check out the USDA Farm to School Procurement Guide for more information regarding local procurement. We talked a lot today about values-based procurement. The Center of Good Food Purchasing is a great resource to help you integrate value-based procurement into your meal service. And those links are attached to this slide. I want to thank you all for your time and attention during this presentation, and we'll allow this time to be for any questions if you have any.
Hi, this is Lois. I put 2 questions in the chat. Just wanted to make sure that Claire had a chance to see it. Oh,
I'm looking at, yeah, I am looking at your question. Can we use the funds to pay external contractors to lead garden time? So my first answer would be whatever is in your grant agreement that you requested in your application is what you're allowed to request. So I'm looking at yours right now, actually. And you requested staffing for meal service time. So you would be limited to utilizing your staffing time for those administrative purposes. So yes, that would be what your budget shows, and so you wouldn't be able to use your staffing funds for something else like a garden and
program.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine, Claire. Thank you. I just wanted to receive clarification. That'll help me for next time. And then the other ask was around the budget update. So you said for 23-24, if you're a single site, we don't need to update. But going forward, it sounds like everyone needs to update their budget if they are awarded the grant. Is that correct?
That would be for sites that have multiple sites.
So it's multiple sites have to update
the budget for their
ongoing,
CACFP
but
application.
single sites never have to.
They don't have to right now, no.
Okay, All right, I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
My understanding is that that's going to be asked of in your next application. So your question was specific to the 24-25 school year, and I believe that you will have to include that within your application itself to CACFP.
Okay, all right. So again, then Claire, so 24-25, everyone must do it. 23-24, only sponsors with multiple sites.
Okay, so I think that we're getting a little so for CACFP application, not for the grant application. Is that helpful?
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Claire is actually with WSDA, and both Adriana and myself are with OSPI. So this, what Adriana was referring to is just about CACFP applications and budgets, not the budget for the grant itself.
Right. So I'm referring to CACFP budgets. You said that we needed to include the amount of this grant into our budget. We
For
need to revise
24-25.
it.
No,
Right.
you
For
don't.
those with
You don't have to revise it this year unless it's unless you have multiple sites. So only multiple sites have to revise their budget with their in-wins or with their program specialist. Next year when you're applying, you need to include those funds in your budget.
Okay, that was my question. So for 24-25 for CACFP going forward, we need to include this amount in our budget.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I think we were just kind of going in a circle, but thank you for clarifying.
There's a lot of budgets we're talking about, and I'm like, oh wait, which one are you talking about?
Any other questions about procurement for Adriana? Well, if not, you always can reach out to us, to Adriana or Nicole at OSPI and myself at WSDA, and we'd be happy to help. So thank you so much for being here for this long session today, this afternoon. I really appreciate your time and look forward to chatting with you individually in the future, and we'll see you next year for office hours. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.